At the edge of the quarry, a leopard sat beside the fence all night. It did not pace. It did not vanish into the thorn scrub when headlights crossed the service road. It did not snarl at the guard tower or slip back into the dark the way a wildcat should when steel, floodlights, and human noise took over the landscape. It stayed there, silent, low, patient, beside the chain-link fence above the eastern cut, watching one exact stretch of dust and broken rock, as if something beyond the wire mattered more than fear. By the time security supervisor Martin Deller found the helmet half buried in the quarry dust at dawn, he understood with a cold certainty that the Leopard had not been waiting for prey. It had been waiting for someone to notice what the machines had missed. The Red Ridge Quarry never really slept. At night it became quieter, but never still. Conveyor motors idled low in standby mode. Sodium floodlights hummed on poles above the main hall roads. Water dripped from wash screens into settling pits with a hollow metallic rhythm that echoed off the terraced walls. Even when blasting crews were gone and the loading shovels sat in their bays like sleeping animals, the quarry kept a mechanical pulse under the dark. It was a place shaped by pressure and weight, rock faces cut in steps, haul roads climbing like scars, crusher towers, fuel sheds, dust suppression lines, and the constant human confidence that heavy equipment could impose order on anything solid enough to mine. Martin had worked security there for 16 years and trusted very little about the place after sunset. He was 48, broad through the chest, thick in the wrists, and built like a man who had spent most of his life opening gates, checking locks, and walking ground other people only crossed in trucks. Before quarry security, he had done a few years in private industrial contracts and a few more in a warehouse yard where the main threats were theft and weather. The quarry was different. The danger there was geometry, edges, blind drops, unstable spoil, and machinery with no room for human mistakes. He liked rules because rules kept people alive, which was why the Leopard unsettled him so quickly. The first sighting came in at 9:17 p.m. from gate guard Elias Mokoena, a younger officer who had a tendency to overstate small things and understate large ones. He radioed from the east perimeter in a voice trying hard to sound controlled. "Control, I've got eyes on a cat outside the fence near marker E4. Martin, seated in the security office with a mug of burnt coffee and 4 camera feeds in front of him, didn't even look up at first. A cat? Not a cat, a big cat. That made him look. He keyed the radio. Define big. A pause. Leopard big. Martin stood so quickly his chair rolled into the filing cabinet. Red Ridge lay at the edge of scrub hills and broken bush country, where leopard sightings were rare but not impossible. Workers found tracks sometimes along the runoff channel after long dry spells. One machine operator had once sworn he saw a leopard ghost across Bench Road at dawn, though no one could confirm it, and quarry men were not famous for strict sobriety off shift. The Regional Wildlife Office had warned operators more than once that expanding work zones pushed animals into odd corridors. Still, a leopard at the east fence at full dark was not routine. Martin grabbed his flashlight, radio, and truck keys and was halfway out the office before he called the site manager. By the time he reached the east perimeter road, 2 other guards were already there in the glow of the fence floodlights, both standing a little farther back than they needed to and trying to make that look tactical. The leopard was real. It sat on a low rise of shale and scrub outside the chain-link fence, maybe 20 feet from the wire, body folded neatly under itself, tail tip twitching once every few seconds. Under the floodlights, its coat looked almost gold, rosettes breaking across muscle and shoulder in perfect dark clusters. It was not especially large for a leopard, but everything about it felt more substantial than the space around it. Too still, too balanced, too aware. And it was not looking at the men. It was looking through the fence, specifically toward the open dust shelf just inside the eastern haul zone, where the road curved above the inactive cut. Martin followed its line of sight and saw nothing at first but tire ruts, dust, and a stack of spare blasting mats near the berm. "Did you haze it?" he asked Elias. "Tried the truck horn," Elias said. It moved 2 steps and sat again. Martin did not like that. He had dealt with jackals, baboons, feral dogs, and once a deeply offended honey badger near the generator shed. Wild animals near industrial sites usually chose one of 2 paths when confronted with lights and engines: flight or open threat. This leopard had chosen neither. It simply remained in position beside the fence, watching. Martin took the spotlight from the truck and hit it with a tight beam. The leopard blinked once against the brightness, turned its head toward the men for exactly 1 second, and then looked back through the fence at the same strip of quarry floor. "Wrong," Martin murmured. "Should we call wildlife?" one of the guards asked. "Yes," Martin said. "And nobody goes out that gate." He radioed the wildlife response officer, left the required messages, then contacted the quarry superintendent at home. Procedures began turning their slow official gears. Perimeter monitoring, pause on east side night movement, operator warning, no foot patrol beyond the lit zone. It was all correct. It was also not enough to explain why the leopard stayed. At 10:05 p.m., it was still there. At 10:40, after two trucks passed the far upper road and a backup alarm echoed across the cut, it had moved only a few yards down the fence and resettled. At 11:15, Martin drove the inside perimeter in a slow arc, shining his beam across the east bench and down the slope, trying to identify what the animal might be focused on. A carcass, maybe, a trapped antelope, a scent snag on the wire. The eastern haul zone bordered an old strip section where runoff sometimes cut gullies through the dust. If something had died there, that might explain a predator's fixation, but he saw nothing. No movement. No drag marks obvious in the dark. No glint of eyes, no blood. At midnight, the leopard was still beside the fence. By 1 a.m., the quarry felt wrong because of it. Security shifts developed their own relationship with darkness. A site is either noisy in a manageable way or quiet in a manageable way. The leopard altered that. Every camera check, every windshield glance toward the east perimeter, every sweep of light across the dust shelf came with the unsettling awareness that a wild predator had spent hours giving its full attention to something just beyond human understanding. At 1:27, Martin left the office again and drove out alone. He stopped 30 yards from the fence and shut off the engine. The night settled around him immediately. Generator hum from the far plant, insects in the scrub, the metallic tick of cooling engine parts, and beyond it all, the low sleeping mass of the quarry itself. The leopard was there, still. It turned its head toward the truck as the engine died, then faced the interior again. Martin lowered the window and listened. Nothing. No cry, no machinery malfunction, no rockfall. Just the silence of a worked-out bench and the animal's refusal to leave. He hit the horn once. The leopard stood, his body tensed automatically, but the animal did not approach. It walked 3 precise steps along the fence to the right, stopped opposite a gap in the dust where the road shoulder broke toward the eastern cut, and sat again, as if repositioning the humans. Martin stared hard into the darkness beyond that point and saw only the low rise of the dust berm and the black drop where the inactive shelf descended into a narrower lower ledge, not currently lit by the perimeter lamps. He made a note to inspect at first light. The wildlife officer never arrived that night. Distance, staffing, and the unspoken hierarchy of emergencies put a quarry leopard low on the list as long as nobody was bleeding and the cat wasn't trying to enter camp or worker housing. At 3 a.m., Martin sent Elias to make coffee and took the watch himself on the east feed. At 4:12, the leopard lay down. At 4:48, it stood again and paced once. At 5:11, as the sky began to gray behind the spoil mounds, it moved farther along the fence and sat at the exact same point it had chosen after the horn blast. By dawn, Martin had convinced himself of one thing only. There was something in the eastern cut that needed daylight. The morning shift began arriving just after 5:30. Headlamps swept across the yard. Diesel engines turned over. Men in reflective jackets stamped dust off their boots and asked whether the fence cat story was real. Martin told them yes, and told them the east bench was off limits until he checked it personally. Then a quarry fitter named Solomon, pouring tea from a dented flask, said the sentence that changed the entire shape of the morning. "Has anyone seen Peter?" Martin turned sharply. "Peter who?" "Peter Voss, night blasting prep. He signed in yesterday afternoon, but his backy is still parked near Toolshed 3. Martin's stomach tightened. Peter Voss was a contract blasting assistant in his 20s, quiet, competent enough, knew enough to still say "sir" to older men. He had been assigned to survey cord roading on the eastern inactive cut late the previous afternoon with a foreman. The foreman had clocked out. Peter apparently had not been seen leaving. That did not prove anything. Men slept in trucks, wandered off-site with friends, forgot to sign out, disappeared into bad decisions all the time. But under the weight of the Leopard's vigil, the missing truck landed like a stone. "Check the sign-out log," Martin snapped. They did. Peter's entry was there. No exit. Martin's mouth went dry. He grabbed his helmet, radio, and a second flashlight, even though dawn was already building. Then he did what procedure demanded, and what instinct had already decided hours earlier. He locked down the east bench, notified management of a possible missing worker, and headed toward the exact stretch of ground where the Leopard had spent the night staring. The animal watched him go. Inside the fence now, with full morning light beginning to strip the shadows off the quarry walls, the East Hall zone looked deceptively ordinary. Dust, cut rock, a parked water cart, tire marks from yesterday's movement. The inactive shelf beyond the berm dropped into a narrower, lower working lip that had been closed for weeks due to minor instability at the eastern wall. Martin climbed the berm slowly, scanning every step. At first he saw nothing. Then, half hidden where the dust slope broke toward the lower ledge, he saw a hard hat, yellow, scraped, lying on its side with one chin strap twisted under it. Peter's helmet. Martin stopped dead. The helmet alone might have been dropped. A stupid mistake. A forgotten item, except for two things. First, it was below the safe edge marker. In ground, no one should casually walk without purpose. Second, beside it, the dust showed a deep, disturbed slide, as if boots had gone over in loose material and taken part of the edge with them. Martin walked closer, pulse kicking hard in his throat. The shelf edge had partially sheared during the night. Not a full collapse, just a slumping failure of compacted dust and crushed stone where the old inactive lip undercut the new hall margin. One person standing wrong there in twilight could have gone down 12 feet to the lower ledge, with no one above hearing much more than a muffled slide. He crouched and looked over. At first he saw only rock, then movement, a hand, weakly lifting from beside the lower berm. Martin lunged forward to the edge and shouted, "Peter!" A voice floated up, scraped raw and small with exhaustion. "Here!" Alive. Relief hit so hard it almost made him sit down where he stood. Peter lay on the lower ledge, tucked against a boulder and the wall, one leg pinned awkwardly beneath a slumped slab of fractured shale, face gray with dust and pain. His radio was gone. One sleeve was torn. Blood had dried in a long line from his temple into his collar. Judging by the state of him, he had spent the entire night down there. And if the Leopard had not held the fence line all night, Martin might not have checked that edge before machinery began moving. He keyed his radio so fast he clipped his own chin with it. Medical rescue to east inactive cut now. Live casualty on lower ledge. Rope team, stop all movement. The quarry, which moments earlier had been waking into work, shifted instantly into emergency mode. Sirens did not blare. Industrial rescues often sound strangely practical from outside. But engines cut, radios sharpened, supervisors ran, and within minutes the site medic and two rope-trained response workers were on the upper shelf with stretchers, webbing, and a casualty kit. Below them, Peter tried to move and cried out. "Don't move!" Martin barked. "We've got you." The rescue team rigged to an anchor truck in a drilled bollard point because quarrymen trust rope more when it's backed by steel. The medic descended first with a helmet, camera, and trauma kit. Martin stayed topside, relaying to control, though every part of him wanted to be down on the ledge simply because staying still while another man lay pinned nearby felt wrong. The Leopard remained by the fence. Workers noticed it now, too. Men who laughed at most things did not laugh at that. It sat beyond the wire, chest lifted, still watching the lower ledge area, even as humans flooded the site with urgency. Peter's report came in fragments once the medic reached him. He had gone back after dusk to retrieve a survey marker he thought he'd left near the edge, slipped when a section of crusted dust collapsed and landed badly on the lower ledge. His left leg had been pinned under loose rock. He had shouted until dark, then conserved his strength when no one answered. At some point after midnight, he had heard something pacing above and thought it was either the quarry devil old men joked about or a hyena. It had been the Leopard. The medic stabilized his head and checked the pinned leg. Not crushed through, thank God. Possible fracture, heavy bruising, dehydration, exposure, but alive. They freed the rock with airbags and pry bars, then packaged him into a rescue stretcher and hauled him up through a curtain of dust, while every man on the upper bench held his breath like the rope system was attached directly to their own ribs. When Peter's helmeted head cleared the edge and the stretcher slid onto solid ground, a sound moved through the crew that was not quite cheering and not quite prayer. The site medic loaded him into the response truck and headed for the county hospital. Martin stood in the settling dust, chest still rising too fast, and only then turned toward the fence. The Leopard was standing now. For one long second, it looked directly through the wire at the cluster of men around the place where Peter had been found. Then it turned, slipped through the scrub beyond the fence line, and disappeared into the low thorn and shale without once looking back. No drama, no rush, simply gone. Later in the office, the mine manager tried to make the incident fit into paperwork. Worker unaccounted for overnight after fall from unstable edge. Located during morning perimeter response after unusual wildlife presence, drew security attention to sector. Rescue successful. Investigation pending. It was accurate. It was also too small. Because outside reports and formal language, everybody at Red Ridge kept returning to the same impossible shape of the night. A leopard had sat beside the fence for hours instead of leaving the quarry margins as it should have. It had remained fixed on one section of ground where a man lay below. It had waited until dawn, until someone finally checked. Martin never said the animal came for help. He did not believe in dressing facts in soft human clothing. But when Elias asked him quietly, after the rescue trucks left, and the east bench stood empty under the late morning sun, "Do you think it knew he was there?" Martin looked out toward the fence and answered in the only way that felt honest. "I think it found something alive in the dark," he said, "and it wouldn't leave it." That was enough. More than enough, really. Because at quarries, on roads, in barns, under docks, people like to imagine danger announces itself dramatically, with alarms, collapse, shouts, sparks. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the first warning is one wild animal sitting where it does not belong until somebody pays attention. And sometimes at the edge of a quarry, that warning stays all night beside the fence, until security finds the helmet in the dust.